What's up, folks? I wanted to let you know that this week's going to be a little bit screwy on the schedule because I'm releasing this now as kind of a part one, and part two is probably going to come out midweek next week. What I've got going on is I've got a guest coming in to film. His name is Ryan McBeth, and you guys have probably seen one of his videos. If you haven't seen one of his videos, then you're wrong. You need to catch up with where the rest of the world is.
Why do Russian tank turrets seem to pop off of their hulls when hit? I'm a software engineer, but I was an anti-tank infantryman for 20 years, so I know a little bit about this stuff.
That said, he's got this premise that he wanted to test about sending commercially available AR-15s manufactured in the United States over to the Ukraine. Would they be viable tools? So we've got a test matrix put together. I'll have links in the description box down below where you can find his stuff as well as a test plan. And basically, I'm just going to kind of run you through what I've been doing for the last couple days in preparation for his arrival. Making my way through the cornfield here. I didn't expect it to be quite this tall before we were doing this. So I'm setting up the 100-yard shot. And to do that, to get above the cornfield, we're just going to put it up on the, that would be the 300-yard position. So I'm just going to get in here without getting too beat up by a sticker bush. And I think for now I'm just going to, good enough. Day of, I'll just come back and throw a big stone under it. Oh, never mind. This is supposed to be a cornfield. So many mosquitoes. Here we go. And yeet. So let's take a few moments out and talk about the firearms that we're going to be using, because this is my side of the contribution that I feel as though has the most capacity to muck with the results. So whenever you do any kind of scientific analysis of any kind, it's important that you control as many variables as possible. And to that end, Ryan and I had an initial planning meeting, and I have since changed things somewhat to control as many of those variables as possible. So I hope that he's not super upset with me for messing around about, if you know what I mean. So he came to me and he's like, "Hey Kurt, I want to do a 1 in 9 twist, a 1 in 8 twist, and a 1 in 7 twist with these various grain weights." And for anybody who isn't super savvy and know what that means, a 1 in 9 twist, for instance, would be 1 complete revolution of the rifling in the barrel per 9 inches of barrel. Same thing with 8 and 7. So the barrels are all 16 inches in length, so you can do the math on how many revolutions. And what that means is basically some of those barrels are going to be better at stabilizing different weight projectiles than others. There are several other factors with the construction of any rifle that go into how it's going to perform. One of those is going to be the muzzle equipment that's on the end. So as the bullet leaves, there are little tiny forces that are imparted on the bullet as it exits the muzzle that are dependent on what the geometry of the end of the barrel looks like. So in order to make it uniform, I basically ripped all the old stuff off and went with A2 flash hiders. And the reason that was done is simply because it needs to be uniform. So my choices were either to use thread protectors on the end, so just flat crowns, or use some other uniform muzzle equipment. And I just so happen to have 3 A2 flash hiders. One of the other things that I had initially planned on doing was setting up all the rifles from the get-go, so when he showed up, it would all be ready to rock and roll. But that would entail the use of 3 different scopes. Now, the problem I see with 3 different scopes are a couple fold. One, each of those scopes likely has a different magnification range, unless I went out and bought 3 identical scopes, which would just kind of be a little bit outside the budget of this whole endeavor. But 3 different magnifications. So if you had a magnification that was greater, you'd have to set all of the scopes back to a magnification that was uniform in order to not give one rifle a competitive edge over the others. You see what I'm going for here? And then the other thing that I think is probably the most important is the reticles themselves are going to be different thicknesses. Some are going to be fine, some of them are going to be more coarse depending on the budget of the optic at the time. You see what I'm going for? So in order to make sure that every single time we take a shot, we have no bias given to just the way it just happened to be set up that day, we're going to use the exact same optic on every single gun and every single test. Now, I realize that that is going to generate substantially more work than what we had initially kind of planned for, because we're going to have to rip the optic off each time, re-zero, and all that sort of stuff. And I'm actually out here today to do the initial zero on the 1 and 9 gun. We're going to go 1 and 9, 1 and 8, 1 and 7. See where we're going? But I have a tool that is going to help us. And this optic here is an 18 power scope, and it's a 30 millimeter, and it's set up in a 30 millimeter mount from Midwest Industries. And what that means is that this is the correct height, but then also I can just flip this lever and that lever there, and this optic comes right off, and we can throw it on the next one. Now we will have to confirm that zero each time, but we don't need any tools to make that happen. So this is what our target setup is going to look like throughout the test for the most part. What I've done here is I've taken a piece of cardboard and then pasted this grid on it. And the reason for the grid is actually twofold. First of all, this grid will allow us to quickly throw a camera up on it and capture the result without having to get out any tools, do any measurements with any calipers or anything like that, because these are 1-inch squares. The other thing that I think is really important is that we have a consistent, definable point of aim. And that's going to change at different distances. I have a couple different dots of different sizes, so that when we get out to longer distances, we'll have a fluorescent orange big dot in the center of this thing that we can clearly discern the center of. Out at 300 yards, we probably won't be able to see this, or the reticle will likely cover a substantial portion of it, and there may be some ambiguity. So it's important for consistency between both shooters that we have a defined, prolific center point of aim. Now, Ryan does not hail from a free state, but this one is a free state, and I don't actually own any 5.56 magazines that are less than standard capacity. So this is a 350 Legend magazine, and while it is a 350 Legend magazine, it holds exactly 3 rounds of 5.56, which is what our test protocol calls for. The other thing about that is having a reduced size magazine for bench shooting can help, because the angle at which you have to prop the gun up, you have to usually end up putting the gun up higher on a sandbag than if you just had a shorter magazine, because the magazine would hit the tabletop or the range top or whatever it is. And that can cause feeding issues, but also it just makes the whole process less comfortable, because you have to get farther from the ground. So the shorter the magazine, the lower the ground that you can get, and that's what we're going to be using in today's videos. So now we're going to perform the initial zero, and this is the 1 and 9 gun. It is of Delton manufacturer, and the only major difference between this gun as factory and the configuration that it's in now is I've added an adjustable gas system to the front, the rifle speed gas control, because this is the gun that I use for evaluation of suppressor gassing, and so this gun may or may not run right out of the gate, and we may have to adjust it. But the test protocol calls for a 25-yard zero. All my stuff is always done at a 50-yard zero. So what we're going to be doing is bringing it down to a 25-yard zero and set the zeros out to 25. And then the initial protocol for testing is a 25-yard zero, and then the first shot's at 50. So I'm okay with it. Personally speaking, I find the 25-yard zero to be mega outdated, but whatever. The other guns that we're going to be using are a Sequence Precision build, that's going to be the 1 and 8, and then a VSOrdnance Forgery for our 1 and 7. So the way the adjustments work on this one is you pull up on this cap, and then that allows you to rotate it. If it's sunk down, then it won't go anywhere. So we need to come up and to the left, which is not surprising considering this was on a different gun when we started today. So what are we in? We're in mils, which unfortunately is the wrong measurement system. I'm sure that this manufacturer does make scopes that are in the correct measurement system, but it's what I had laying around. confirmation shot. Started with these two, and I started shooting singles after that. So I shot this one, and then I moved it up big time and overshot. So I brought it back down, and then I did my windage adjustment. And looks like we're gonna be good. Okay, so it's time to zero this thing out. Now you can see here there's an indicator dot, and you can see that we're somewhere between 2L and 2.5L. We wanna make this 0. So I mentioned earlier that you pull out on the turret to adjust it. To zero it out on this particular model, you take a live round, maybe, please, a screwdriver, you take that off. And what that does is allow this to be picked up without actually spinning the turret. And we spin it down till it's at 0. And we just put that right back in. Check out how courteous I'm being. I'm covering this position over here, and that's where we're going to shoot our confirmations, our 50, 100, 200 yard shots. And then we're going to move over to there to shoot our 300 yard shots. Now, normally when we have a guest out here, we give them the full experience, if you will. Yeah, bro, just go ahead and lay down in the mud. It's part of the gig, right? This spot's not really that big of a deal. But over here, we had to move some mats. The reason we had to move those mats is because I don't know what was growing there, but something that was growing there was giving me horrific poison rash, like the bubbly CP type. And I'm usually not very allergic to that sort of stuff. So we moved those mats, and now it's kind of muddy underneath. So to make our guest as comfortable as possible in the collection of scientific data, we're going to set up a halfway decent shooting position. So I just rolled into home. It's about to start storming. So I wanted to say before I go that the purpose of this video is really to kind of set the stage for folks that may not frequent this channel. I know that all of you, my continuous subscribers, will have seen all this before, and this will be just kind of second nature to you, but I'm anticipating a fair number of people that perhaps may not have been here before. So again, setting the stage for that. But for you guys, what I would like from you is if you have questions you would like asked of the Ryan McBeth, then please sound off in the comment section down below, and maybe I can get him to commit to an interview. We'll find out. But if you enjoyed this video, then stay tuned and put your predictions also in the comment section on what you think the results will be after we complete part 2.